Why, hello, and thank you for coming. Ugh. Welcome to the realm of Millenia. Be ye man, woman, child. Be ye spirit, creature, or demon. Be ye native migrator or invader. Welcome into Millenia. I am your host, the Millennium Mailman, and I'll be world building for you long after you've begun to acclimate and fit in. So sit back, relax, and let me get started with today's Theatrical Thursday, where I'll be extra, extra and hope you read all about it and listen in to the news that I care to share. Now, without further ado, the week's topics for the hot take was based on therapist and therapy, where the hot take was that therapy isn't a good thing for good people. It's a good thing for bad people and a bad thing for good people, where therapy was made for not good people and made for the worst hidden amongst good people, and that anyone really recommending therapy is more so in a polite manner saying, hey, you shouldn't really be outside of prison and we need you to get a checkup because there's something like heavily wrong with you. So, despite how normalized therapy with and counseling with therapists is getting, counseling should be done with counselors instead of therapist counseling. You shouldn't be subjecting yourself to the literal psychological warfare of an interaction with a therapist, because that is what they get their PhDs for and everything. But that was majority of what the yesterday's video on Hot Take Hump Day was for. So I'm just going to continue and go down the rest of the talking points I had just in extra. Where you got the hot take yesterday, and today's theatrical extraness is just me giving and disclosing all the extra details that were slipped over on yesterday's topic for the in-depth dive. Where again, the summary of yesterday was just basically going over the topic and low tier educating on it, where the origin of therapy and the profession of therapist was actually rooted in science and scientist experimentation on the criminal mindsets, and its biggest infamy of what they were known to do and get away with ethically and morally was rather 50% literally the direct oppression and suppression of women and their voices, be it in the home, be it in family, or just socially. So, yeah. That's why they have their degrees, because in order to be a therapist, you are supposed to be educated, and after you have that education and the certification and the MD license to certify you to allow working, once you have that degree, that's basically everyone socially acknowledging, hey, if anyone can, this person who we had pay for their education and got the education and passed all the tests we have would be the people capable and competent enough to indoctrinate a particular mindset and be able to perpetuate a normal, proper mind out of those with improper minds. So, when you so the hot take is more so aiming at the fact that when you subject yourself to willfully going into counseling instead of with counselors and with therapists instead, you are really diverging from the original intent of what therapeutic treatment was for. it was for changing something, not necessarily to change you and how you feel as a normal person or an already good person. It's therapy, and the therapeutic and their therapeutic natures was not to help you feel better. It was to make you better because you were a terrible person to begin with. So if you go into counseling and therapy with a therapist without that mindset, you're always you always will go into the reciprocal nature and cycle, never-ending cycle of I'll see you next week, because you're not getting the root up to any problems. You're just fixing the surface level, which is where therapists doing counseling is really counterproductive, because their whole aspect of training was to force and coerce and select and first and foremost push the psychological for the psychological initiated change in people. So when you go to them for counseling, which is the subtle push and pull and negotiating aspect, when they already are, when the therapist themselves is going into it with the mindset of, hey, you came to me to fix you, and I in the status of being a counselor can't tell you yes or no, you are wrong or you are right, because I'm here as a counselor, here to guide you. A counselor and counseling is more about guidance and recommendation than it is about telling you what to do, which is, as I said, counterproductive to the actual profession of therapist. So that was a rather winded summary of yesterday's topic. Now let's get to the deep dive. Let's see here. I'll be explaining what counseling is, the goal of counselors, and the idea you should have working with counselors, and why you should go with counselors instead of, well, not necessarily go, because you're your own person and you're plenty capable and should be able to keep that autonomy and of choice to make your own decisions, but just that hot take recommendation rather, right? Remember, I'm being theatrical. I am going to be extra to try and emphasize this point for this week's hot take from the Devil's Advocate. But I'll be going that, and I'll be just more doing the Venn diagram comparison for you of the difference between counselor counseling and therapeutic therapist counseling, and why we are in this normalized differential. But starting off here, page 2, we got counseling is for normal people. Normal people like your average Joe and Sarah, your Tom and Dom. It's counseling is about guidance, planning, rehashing, and holding each other accountable. Where in counseling, you're supposed to set a plan, set a goal, and then hold each other accountable to it. Where your counselor would be the one to, hey, try to contact you. You can contact them at your whims, instead of when you're going to counseling with a therapist, the therapist will tell you, hey, unless it's an emergency, don't really call me. We have this date to talk again. Where as a counselor working with you, actually going for an end-all be-all goal, you can contact them a bit more freely, with a bit more liberty there. So that's one major distinct difference. But yes, counseling. I really write small. Counseling is not the same as when you are going. Counseling with counselors is not the same as getting counseling with caseworkers or counseling with therapists. Working with counseling done with therapists and caseworkers is all about, hey, we suspect there to be a problem, so their whole aspect is to really dig and dive deep to find what the criminal level problematic portions of this needed counseling is about. Vice, if you go into counseling with counselors, the aspect is different. Genuine counselors instead of genuine therapists. Counselors will talk and discuss with you because, hey, you cognitively had the competence to say, hey, I may not necessarily need it, but I sure want it because I'm having trouble with something. I'm having trouble. It's totally normal. Counseling is for normal people with normal issues. So if it's a normal concern you have, talk to an actual counselor. Counselors will do that for you. That's their whole job, to help normal people with normal problems. Where counseling is done for pretty much all adolescents and generally normal for pre-adolescents. That's why it's in public education systems and most any schools. There's something called the guidance counselor. They really help and check in with students at all grade levels, even up to uni and university and college campus levels. It's applicable everywhere. That's why every school has guidance counselors, because the guidance counselors, you get on their list and roster, their whole job is to check in and hold accountable for those willing to be held accountable. And this list, rehashed from yesterday, the difference between normal and abnormal things, just so you can have it in your mind, I'll say it again. Normal things that you seek help with a counselor and get counseling for would include wanting interventions. If you see that you have a problem and you want help in troubles and you want others to help intervene and act as a secondary level of accountability and support, you need counseling. Talk to a counselor. That's to include, like, hey, I have a bit of a drinking habit. I may or may not be an alcoholic. AAA. But what is that? It's an accountability group for alcoholics. Go to the AAA meeting. There's a counselor there, not a therapist. Why? Because it's a normal problem that people generally have and can genuinely get regular help with. It does not make them a criminal. The suicidal ideations and intrusive thoughts, those are normal things. What's abnormal is actually attempting to participate in the act of suicide. That is, when you make the attempt, that is where you would get a therapist involved. So long as you're just thinking about it, you're having troubles, you're getting stressed, everyone does. Everyone does. There are a select number of resources and groups and communities and many other things that a counselor already has access to. All of them do. You need help, you need guidance. Normal thing. If you have those thoughts, fantasies, and ideations, counselors will help you. Counselors can help you. If the counselor deems that they can't help you or it's a bit much, they would get a referral and help you get to the proper resource and to other people. Be that a caseworker, be that a therapist, the counselor will do that. You don't need to subject yourself from the jump into psychological warfare, even in a case like that. Because again, it is a bit much in order to, despite how normalized it is to just seek a therapist help nowadays, it is not normal to go straight into the psychological warfare games that therapists are literally trained in all of their higher education to passively utilize against and with whoever they're counseling. Let's get through it though. Normal things. Wanting social interaction or just having conversation. If you just want to talk to someone, counselors there. They're willing. If you need spiritual guidance, there is spiritual counseling. There's rabbis, there's a church, most churches, the pastor or priest or deacons. They're willing to offer that spiritual guidance and talk to you. That's spiritual counseling. There are resources, there are ways, there are people for that. They aren't therapists because they don't need to be indoctrinated in the ways of that particular psychological warfare to directly use against you. Naturally, they do it passively. So, despite how harsh it sounds, I'm not trying to put a red dot laser beam and dug out all therapists in that manner. No, I'm just saying it's not their place to be allowing people to subject themselves in that manner. It's different. Everyone should be normalizing seeking out counselors, genuine counselors, not therapist counseling, because there are two different ballparks. The last few here, if you need guidance, if you need help setting standards, goals, and planning, there are literally sectors of counseling for each of those. Those are normal problems. Get normal help. Seek out normal counseling with normal counselors. Cases where you might want to consider making that jump into therapist interaction would be abnormal situations where people would generally stipulate mandating a therapist anyway, such as when people need interventions. Say like an alcoholic. The whole idea of being an alcoholic is normal. Whether you agree or not, it is normal. It happens all the time. The abnormal aspect is when people can't seem to function at all without it, because there are plenty of high functioning alcoholics, right? When you can't seem to go a single second in the day of your life without alcohol, and despite being under the heavy influence of alcohol, you continuously make wrong choice after wrong choice. You drink a full bottle of spirit or Tito's, and you immediately hop behind the wheel. That is an extreme alcoholic. You down a full bottle like it was just some Monster's energy drink, and then you immediately get into fights every day. You can't help it. There's no one you won't fight for a sip of alcohol. Abnormal. That's different. Just wanting to drink and drinking all the time. There's giving yourself the habit of being comfortable while drunk. Normal. Get some counseling, get some help, drink less, or be sober and not drink at all. That's fine. Seek regular counseling. Oh, this guy is committing crime after crime and they literally cannot help themselves. They need intervention. That's the difference. That is the difference between counselor and then, hey, get a therapist. Abnormal cases where would include people who have the thought process that it's okay, or I can't help myself from, or have self-control from committing physical or sensual violences against other people. That would be a case where you would definitely need to skip the counselor and go straight to a therapist. People, as I already kind of mentioned, people who have attempted and or failed suicides, abnormal situations, they would need to go straight to a therapist. People who are considered habitual offenders of something, first generation habitual offenders, rather. So if in your family there isn't a soul who's ever touched alcohol in their life, gone the whole route, and then you yourself, out of nowhere, because of particular traumas that you can't explain or express, yes, skip the counselor, go straight to a therapist. The therapist will help you uncover what that problem is. That is their their whole motto, their whole stick. So they help figure out what it is that changed you to go down this route of criminal mentality, of unacceptable insanity or wrongness, right? That is what they have their whole degree for. If you're a first generation habitual offender of something, go to the therapist. That is okay. That is something that should be normal and considered normal. If you're not a first generation, your father was a drinker, your mother was a smoker and tequila lover, and you're just a straight alcoholic, but a high functioning one, get some counseling if you think it's a problem. It's struggling with your finances, it's screwing this up, that up, and you just want to seek guidance and counseling or financial management assistance. Counselors, all counselors have access or knowledge of particular resources that will help you through that. If you're a second generation, third generation habitual offender or something, get regular counseling. Those regular counselors will be able to help you out with the problem. If you're criminal, have criminal mindsets that need fixing, or you're a first generation habitual offender, that case, skip the counseling and go to therapeutic counseling with therapist. But back to it, counselors are the not so beat detectives sifting through the details of your life that you can articulate, and are all about three things, these three specifically: finding where you are and what you want to be. Finding where you are and what you want to be is goal number one of counseling. Because they'll sit there, they'll talk to you, and they'll figure out, okay, what happened, where are we now, what do you want? And after they figure that out, they ask you, what's the goal of what you want to be or want out of this interaction with me? Okay, cool. Now, from that point, they're going to go down this roster and figure out, okay, and talk about it. Goal number two, counselors are those people finding out what happened and what can we do now about it. You go to a counselor, you're having problems, say in your marriage. You go to marriage counseling with a marriage counselor, not a therapist. You go to marriage counseling with this counselor, and their whole aspect is, okay, what happened? Why are we here in this room? Why did you guys feel the need that you might need help? You'll talk about it, you'll say it. Okay, now what do you guys think we can do about it? And after you guys say it, I'll take that in consideration and recommend some things for you, and we'll see about where that goes. Okay? If you think you want me to check in next week or whatever, we can figure that out. That is the whole thing. They'll do check in, see how it's doing, and tell you to only come back if there are more problems or different problems. They're not going to have you down this perpetual cycle of, yes, for the rest of your life, come back and meet me every single day. Because the goal of counselors is this aspect of, if I never see these guys again, I probably did my job very well. I probably did it right. They came in, they got the information, I connected them to the resources and the communities they needed, and they'll let me know if there was something wrong or something different. We figure it out, and we figure it out. We figure out what it was, and we figure out how to settle it. We get it done. I earned my pay today. Right? And the third one for counselors, the rather goal of them per se, would be figuring out what's past and present so we can near a desired future. When you walk in with counselors and their counselor counseling, they talk about everything you possibly can articulate, and they help steer you to the goal that you actually want. They work with you for the goal you want, rather than the goal they say you should want or need. Proper counselor work with you. Proper counselors work with you as much as you are open, honest, and allow them to be involved in being opinionated. Because the decision, when you work with counselors in counseling, the decision is absolutely yours when you go in there. Counselors are the option for those who acknowledge and want assistance. You being there, because you being there with a counselor proves that you can fix things, or you're competent and capable enough to recognize your own certain problems and the changes you do want. When a counselor sees you walk in, they already acknowledge you know you have something in your mind that you recognize is problematic, you're having trouble with, and there is something you want, the goal that you are aiming for, that I can help you, like target assistance, reach. And counselors, depending on how open and honest you are with them and how much you allow them to get involved with your decision making, they will go the distance with you, not necessarily for you, not against you, not in place of you, and they certainly won't leave you alone to figure it out, because you let them in. When you work with counselors, you let them in, and they will work with you every step of the way. The difference between counselors and therapists. A therapist are psych wards. Therapists are the shell company of prisons. And again, I'm being extra. It is Theatrical Thursday, so don't shoot the messenger here. I'm only their Millenia mailman. I am paraphrasing, but please do think with an open mind as I say this. I will repeat it. It does sound a bit jarring and curt, but it's honest. And it's an analogy, it's not precise, but this is the way I'm saying it to help you kind of better understand what the hot take is. Therapists are the psych ward. They themselves represent their whole profession, which is the psychological ward, where they do psychological warfare and case-by-case experimentation and change upon their subjects or clientele. Therapists are the psych ward. Therapists are the shell companies of prisons. Therapists are the shell company of prisons. Why? Because they are the last say-so before a courtroom's ruling upon you, and the first trusted opinion for a release. If you go to court and you care to plead insanity or this, that, and the third, they are the last voice a credible judge or jury is going to listen to. Be like, hey, I'm on the fence here. What does this expert have to say about you? What is their professional opinion? A therapist is going to be the last voice they want to hear right before making their decision, because it's from a professional whose expertise is on the minds. So when you go to a therapist or think of going to therapist, recognize, hey, do I really want this? Because they are the shell company of prisons. They are the further extension of, hey, should this person be sent to prison, or do they just need help? Oh, they say this or this about them? Nope, that's an absolute criminal. Get them in jail. Go them straight to jail. Oh, I believe this person can be indoctrinated and fixed, and everything that caused it and was about it Just allow them to work with me or any other therapist. They can and will be better. They are the last voice in a courtroom before making the decision because of their expertise. So they get called in for their expertise. And they are the first trusted opinion for release. So if a prisoner, this, that, because believe it or not, I believe they do often put this aspect into movies as well. Therapists are sent into prisons to talk with the prisoners, to indoctrinate and correct and refine them that they can be released back into society. But so long as the therapists are saying absolutely not, those criminals will stay in prison. Vice, if the therapy gives the okay, those people can be let out. So they are the first trusted opinion for a release. Therapist, let me just reiterate that. Therapists are the psych ward. Therapists are the shell companies of prisons. They are the last say so before a courtroom ruling and the first trusted opinion for a prisoner's release. Why? Because therapists incriminate and validate physical or pharmaceutical intervention based on the details of your life that you cannot articulate. I repeat, therapist incriminates and validate physical or pharmaceutical intervention based on the details of your life that you cannot articulate. Counselors don't do that. Because of the way counselors are going to try to help and assist you based on the things you can articulate. Therapists, remember, they're psychological. They're all about the mind. They're scientists. They dig deeper because they have the degree and you don't. They literally are assumed to know better than you. So they go into things believing, hey, what are they not saying? What can I see looking at them, analyzing them, their manner of speaking, the way they talk about things? What are they not saying that I'm analyzing?
How lazy are you? Take it downstairs.
Alright. Not sure if the microphone picked it up, but I did have to settle a few things before getting back. Sorry for the disruption. Alright. But where was I? I'm gonna just restart the therapist section and get into it. Therapists are psych wards. Therapists are the shell company of prisons. They have the last say so before a courtroom ruling and the first trusted opinion for a release. Therapists incriminate and validate physical interventions based on the details of your life that you cannot articulate. That would per se to include physical therapies. A therapist is going to look at you, figure out the information, everything you aren't saying. They're going to look at the resources, go through their experience, and validate your physical interventions. A physical therapist is going to put you through massage therapy, physical therapy, based on the things that you aren't saying because they know more about the human anatomy, your condition on paper, and this and that. They incriminate and validate intervention based on physical and or pharmaceutical intervention based on the things in your life that you cannot articulate. So, all in all, that is, I believe that's pretty much where I cut off. That is to say that, especially with the pharmaceutical aspect, when therapists in counseling go through, they'll psychoanalyze you with little to few words because they don't really have to say anything at all to you. Their goal is to figure out the problem, diagnose and label you as something, and then administer their solution. So, they're incriminating. That comes from the idea that therapists have this relatively close relationship with the judgment, enforcement, and imprisonment systems. So remember, they're the last word of on the fence in a courtroom. They incriminate. If police are bringing them into an investigation for their expertise, they're there to justify and validate their presence being there. Oh, I shouldn't even be here. This is not even my realm of study. I shouldn't be here because this isn't necessarily a criminal aspect of this kind of nature. So they're incriminating you in that degree, saying, yes, this is your realm, or they're going to unincriminate you, saying, this is not necessarily something of police jurisdiction. Now that I have my expertise in here, it would be more my realm of indoctrination and correction, minimize and eliminate police and prison involvement, and the judge may or may not relinquish control of this person or people of question from the jailhouse into therapeutic handling. And thus, therapists incriminate and they validate based on the physical intervention, as I already expressed initially, and they validate pharmaceutical intervention as well, because even the most hands-off therapists have the ability to have a give credible referral to certain drugs. So, based on the details of your life that you can't articulate. So if you have traumas, if you have anxiety or stress, they are the connection to get you access to that. So they normally will base it off of the things you aren't saying. You can say this, you can say that, but far too many people have a certain level of weaponized incompetence per se, and are able to say proper buzzwords here and there. So despite therapists genuinely listening to you as much as they possibly can, they are most certainly going to be judging you based on the things you aren't actually saying, more so than the things that you are. Because the things that you do end up saying will mainly be used as incriminatory evidence against whether or not your word is even credible. So a therapist isn't necessarily listening to you to have a full understanding of what their diagnosis is going to be. Their diagnosis is going to essentially come from the things they're hearing that you aren't saying, and the incrimination of how credible and how able they feel they can trust and believe you and the things you say comes from how contradictory or reasonably contradictory your own words are and coming out to be in front of them or to them. Again, so it's much less about that in that manner. So from there, I told you the three things counselors are and all about. Counselors are all about finding where you are and what you want to be. They're about finding what happened and what we together, you and the counselor, can do about it. And then third, figuring out what's past, present, and helping you get nearer to your desired future. The three things for a therapist with therapy is a therapist putting you through therapy is saying, a effectively saying that knowing this, you should try this. They're all about that procedural compliance because, again, they have the PhD in this field of study. They're the scientist with case study after case study and the assumed competence to rationalize figuring out what the problem is. Knowing what you did say and knowing what I know that you didn't say, you should try this. They frame it as a suggestion, but it's not really a suggestion. They frame it as a suggestion because when you go to a therapist for counseling, they're not allowed to make it as much of a mandate as they want to or should because that is their profession. So there is that secondary aspect to it as well. There, where a counselor is going to say, here, I'm working with you, let me recommend this. A therapist is saying, okay, I'm going to recommend you to follow through with doing this. I'm not working with you, but I recommend you should do this. If you don't, you don't. And if you do, and it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. We'll do try something else, and you'll be a new, different case study because this generally freaking works. Or maybe we have up the dose or lower the dose, whatever to that version. Second, the first thing therapy is and says is knowing this, you should try this. The second thing therapy is and says is that not knowing or remembering blank, you will this or else suffer. Right? So, effectively, the first one is their framed reference, a recommendation, the way they frame their expectations as a recommendation when it's really what they've already determined and diagnosed you to definitively be, because therapists always diagnose by the end of their sessions, right? And then the second one is saying the second thing and goal of a therapist, and what a therapist is saying is, based on the things we don't know that I know or you aren't recalling, we're going to be doing this. We will, or you will rather, be putting this and enacting this. Otherwise, I don't understand. Even the therapist is sitting there like, I don't understand why you came. You can just suffer because I know better. I'm the one with the PhD. I'm the one with the certificates. I'm the one with the qualifications. And I say you will do this because what I'm framing as a recommendation is more of a voluntold you situation. And if you don't do what I voluntold you to do, oh, okay, you don't do it. Go ahead and suffer. It's not my fault. It's out of my hands. It's not my fault. That's another perspective of therapy. Either you're going to do as I say, or you're going to suffer from not. Because therapist and therapy, both practices, follow the procedural compliance based on rigorous testing and case study after case study and experience. You have to follow these rules that I, as your therapist, set for you, be it in counseling or therapy. I'm setting the standard for you. You either listen or you don't. And if you don't and you happen to suffer, it's a I told you so situation. And I don't have to say the words, oh, I told you so. But it's just going to be evident. I told you something and you didn't listen. So, by default, I'm always right. Therapist is always right. It's not the same thing as a customer is always right that we get in the service industry. It's always the therapist is always right. And even when they're wrong, even if you following their instructions doesn't get the result they were expecting, so long as you don't do as they say, you are always wrong, and we'll never know that they were wrong if you didn't follow their instructions. So it's really a bit of a catch-22 per se. You, based on the second rule, you either listen to them and fail, or you don't listen to them, or vice versa. If you don't listen to them, it's your fault. You failed, and if you do listen to them and fail, that's because we just happen to choose the wrong thing. I have a million different options here to make you a different kind of case study and get you closer on that path to resolution. But until we go through this entire list of a million things that you still have to pay for, that we'll try and try and try again, I am, as your therapist, am always right and you are always wrong, especially when you're not following direction. Because my recommendations aren't really recommendations. Third one here, well, let me repeat them. First one, knowing this, you should try this. Second one, not knowing or remembering blank, you will try this, or else you can go ahead and feel doomed to suffer. The third and final one of therapy is, and what it's saying and what it's doing, the goal of it is that 3, despite whatever you want or know or believe, you will follow as I say, or it's and I told you so, even if I'm also wrong. Because even when my option's wrong and all blame can be put on me, no one will put the blame on me because it's the procedure. And I kind of already went over that. No one will be blaming me, your therapist, because it's the procedure, and there are still about 12 more drug options and 5 different other activities more that we could go down this list and put you through and do from this procedural compliant list, and maybe 11 more sessions before the court says I am wrong. Because in therapy, it is the steady progression of them taking step by step higher dosage or more radical interactive choices, right? So that's the therapist, the PhD response, where even if you go through similar situations with a counselor, it's always the choices we have available that you get to choose from. A counselor might have the same 12 options and 5 activities, but at every step of the way, working with you, they will allow you to actually choose which of these you want to start with, which one you want to try next if that didn't work out, because the choice is yours to make when you go in with a genuine counselor. Vice going in with a therapist, especially with the pharmaceutical aspect of it all, they're making the choice for you, and you'll choose to follow through and listen to them on those, or you're going to not and suffer your own consequences. But so long as there's a procedure and a list and that they're still working on and can go through, a therapist is never wrong in the court, and relatively in the court of law, so long as they're in compliance to their procedure and practices, because the procedure protects them to that degree. So they never have to admit they're wrong. And you can never really force them and push them to admit it wrong because you didn't listen. You're being impatient and not following through. It's always your fault, because the fact that you're here with a therapist displays that you're wrong. And if you try to get, for lack of a better word, aggressive or argumentative with a therapist, it's just goes to show, oh, whoa, he's getting mad, he's getting aggressive, he's getting impatient, he's belligerent, No amount of proper communication is going to change the fact that, hey, now there is evidence that, hey, if there was a question, you were right or wrong before, there's no question now. Because no matter how provocative you may feel the therapist to be, That's no justification for you to lose composure and anything. But they gave me wrong advice. Well, that's too bad. They're following the procedure, and you need to get in line and follow the procedure too. And the thing they're not going to say is that if you don't like the procedure and you want to make your own choices, you should have talked to a regular counselor and some regular counseling because you're a normal person with normal problems. But so long as you come to a therapist and you have an attitude, or you're a jerk, you're just disagreeable with and to them, or they're a jerk and they're not agreeable and have disagreements with you, the only concept there is that, oh, you're reacting like all the prisoners who don't even want to talk to the therapist. You're acting like all the prisoners who don't want to change and listen to the therapist. So, end all be all, the court is never going to side with you because, hey, you just proved their point that you are inherently wrong and you needed them and you still need them because you don't have the control, the understanding, the weaponized incompetence, and or the fortitude to handle this psychological warfare that a therapist is passively going to be able to put you through. Because proper therapy never gives more than the illusion of choice in their psychological warfare. Because if you're in their office, there was never the hope that you'd be right. A therapist, when you come to them, knows and expects you to be wrong. Therapy is exclusively for those who need it and can't without the therapist, and can't do things or resolve it themselves. Therapy is exclusively for those who need physical and or pharmaceutical intervention in their lives. Which is why, hot take of the week, therapy isn't a good thing for good people. It's a good thing for wrong people. Because therapy wasn't meant for good people. It was made for the worst amongst good people. Because anyone really recommending therapy to you and saying you should be in therapy with a therapist or counseling with a therapist is just trying to politely say you deserve to be put in a prison somewhere until major mental changes have occurred permanently in your mindset and in your life. So, yeah, that is my page 2 of the 3 pages on therapy hot take for this week. We got one more. I'll probably do it on Funny Guy Friday. I can spin it in a funny way. Dark humor, maybe. I don't know. Just yet. But yes, that is it. Hot take, week 1. Therapy isn't a good thing for good people. But hey, that's just me. Your Millenia mailman here to give you the post and news and information from the realm of Millenia. So, that's pretty much all for this Theatrical Thursday. Leave a like if you happen to agree or enjoyed my commentary. Leave a comment of your thoughts and opinions in that space right there down below. And do share if you think this conversation should be talked about a bit more and we can expound on it. And especially I implore real therapists and counselors to give their devoted opinions on the topic. You stitch it in a TikTok or something, or make a comment in the comment section down below giving your expertise and opinion on the things I said in this hot take. And for the remainder of you, or if you're just happen to still be listening, subscribe not just for the sake of subscribing. I want you to exclusively subscribe if you have a desire to, for me to finish and actually finish writing and publish my book called Millenia, the series of Millenia I'm working on. And subscribe and click that bell button if you actually care to listen to my horrible voice talk about other topics and other things later on, or anything. If you don't want to miss a video, just click the bell button, but specifically only subscribe if you actually, because that's going to be how I notice those who actually care for me to write my book, right? Click the subscribe button and that'll let me know that I should continue writing my book. But yeah, that's just me. Like, share, subscribe, comment in the comment section down below. And that's all today from me, your host, the Millenia Mailman. And again, if you're still here, sorry about the cutoff there in the middle of the video. I have some stuff to do. Have a good one, and good night.